discover how to make the impossible easy and achieve 10X Superpower in today's episode with Keith Ellis. Welcome to Awakened Titans podcast with Lily Patrascu, mind-blowing conversations with influential business titans sharing how you can manifest abundance, love, joy, success through quantum awakening, quantum manifestation, quantum healing, quantum miracles, exponential business growth, and innovative products and services. Keith Ellis is a best-selling author and the #1 superpower coach in the world. He invented the art of setting goals in his classic book, The Magic Lamp, Goal Setting for People Who Hate Setting Goals, which has helped more than 100,000 readers around the globe. The first question is, you've developed the concept of the 10X Superpower. Can you tell us what that means and how it helps people achieve what it seems impossible?
Absolutely. First, thank you for having me, Lily. This is a terrific show. So it really is, it's kind of exactly what the title says. Each of us has, whether we know it or not, the ability to transform our lives dramatically. Not just incremental fashion, but to literally take our lives and make them 10 times better than what we have now. If you're an entrepreneur, and I focus a lot on entrepreneurs because they're a unique group in the world, obviously. They understand this stuff. They understand growth. They understand responsibility for being responsible for what they're doing in life and the results they produce. So if you want to increase your revenue, for example, by 10%, or improve your health by 10%, or improve your relationships, these things are possible. What's interesting, and this is really the theme of the book, not only are they possible, they're actually easier than what you're doing now. Most of us are taught how to make incremental goals work. We're not taught how to do big things. In fact, I remember when I was growing up, everybody said, you got to be realistic, Keith. You don't want to do this. You don't want to reach for too much because you don't want to be disappointed. Screw disappointment. Life is disappointment sometimes, right? So what you have to do is put yourself out there and commit to something that you think is beyond you. And then when you do that, amazing things happen. Your brain says, he really wants this. She really wants this. I guess I better figure out how to make it happen. And your life changes on the spot.
Thank you. What inspired you to develop this framework, and how has it impacted your life for the better?
Okay, that's a long story. This is a 3-hour show, right? I just want to make sure. It actually is a succession of things that happen. So years ago, I wrote a book called The Magic Lamp, Goal Setting for People Who Hate Setting Goals. And I wrote it because I knew I needed to set goals, but I didn't like setting goals. And I avoided it. And then one day, this happened in the shower. I had one of those aha moments when I wasn't thinking about work. And suddenly I realized, goal setting is just like making your wishes come true, except that you are your own genie. And I was really excited by that. I almost slipped in a bar of soap, and I jumped out of the shower and I grabbed a pen and paper. I always have something nearby where I can write down ideas. And I started writing this framework that I called the LAMP framework, L-A-M-P framework, for setting goals for people who hate setting goals. So I turned that into a book. I used the framework to write the book because I'd never written a book. I used the framework to publish the book with one of the biggest publishers in the world. Never done that before. And then I started achieving things, and it was great. I used this for a long time. And then I got to the point in my life, and I said, I want more than ordinary achievement. I want extraordinary achievement. I want to take it to the next level. And I didn't know how to do that. And it really bothered me because I'm a success junkie. Have been since as far back as I can remember. I read all kinds of books. I go to seminars. I pepper people, successful people like you, with questions. How did you do it? How did you get where you are? How did you figure this out? How did you create that awesome background behind you? These are useful questions. And I like to find out how other people do it. So what came out of this was a different book called Magic Questions, because I found that at the heart of what everybody's doing, every success system, are some questions, and they have certain characteristics. So I created this framework for that, and I trademarked the term Magic Questions, turned it into a book, and then a successor book called Magic Questions 2.0, and that was great. And then I was thinking, there's still something missing. That's why I said this is a long answer. I apologize. I said there's still something missing. I'm not wanting enough. I'm not audacious enough or ambitious enough. So I said, what if I created goals that I really thought were impossible? I can't do them. What would happen? And then I started making those come true. And I realized what was going on is that I was giving my brain different instructions than I'd been giving my brain my whole life. You know, there's all this artificial intelligence is in the news constantly. You can't pick up a news feed without getting 5 stories about artificial intelligence. And it's all about how do you engineer a prompt for artificial intelligence to get meaningful answers out of it or meaningful results from it. And I realized what I was doing was engineering prompts for human intelligence. That's my specialty. And so the book came out of that. And once I put it all together, I put it into 10 different breakthroughs. And if you incorporate all these breakthroughs into your life, any one of these breakthroughs can change your life. But if you incorporate all of them, you get the 10X superpower. You begin to take that and run with it.
Thank you. Tell us more about the LAMP framework that can enable any ordinary entrepreneur to become his or her own genie without expecting genie to be part of the external circumstances.
Yep. Okay. So first, let's step back for a second. The great thing about having a genie in your life, you rub the lamp and the genie appears. The great thing about that is the genie's doing all the work. That's why we're so fascinated with these stories of magic lamps and genies. The more I thought about it, the more I realized that's not a good thing. That's a bad thing. We need to do what's called resistance training. If you go into a weight room, you don't go and grab a barbell that doesn't weigh anything because it won't do you any good. You need enough weight to create resistance. Otherwise, you won't build muscle, you won't build health, you won't build stamina. You need resistance. And life is that way. So when we have to make our own wishes come true, when we have to be our own genie, we get to grow. And the real benefit of 10X growth, of taking your life to a level 10 times beyond where it is, achieving an impossible goal, the real benefit is not the goal. It's the person you have to become to make the goal happen. It's the growth you have to experience. Because resistance training is how we grow. We know that when we go to a weight room. We know that when we're doing push-ups or pull-ups or whatever it is. We just don't apply it to our lives. But when we apply it to our lives, we realize the last thing we want is a genie that comes out of a lamp. We want a genie that comes out of here. And then we are practicing resistance training. So the lamp process is really about resistance training. You start with the L step, the lamp, and that means lock on. You figure out what you want, and then you lock onto it like a guided missile locks onto its target, and you don't let go. The second step, the A step, is act. You take action. And instead of thinking, oh, I got all this resistance, I got all these obstacles, what am I going to do? You think, I've got resistance, I've got obstacles. That's raw material for success. If I transform this resistance and these obstacles into my success, then I get to grow. That's the equation. Resistance equals success and growth is the big benefit, the big payoff. So lock on, act. The third step is manage your attention. That's the M stands for manage. The most precious resource any of us have today is our attention. Attention is worth way more than money. It's way more than anything we have in a material sense. And we're in a world, of billions of people who are connected online instantly, and everybody's trying to get our attention. And if we treat attention as the most precious property we have, and we manage our attention, then we can accomplish these seemingly impossible things. So the third thing is the M, manage your attention. And the last thing, the P, L-A-M-P, the P stands for persist. And in the simplest sense, that just means keep going till you get what you want. If you stop, if you change your mind, decide you don't want something, that's okay. There's nothing wrong with changing your mind. But if you tell yourself, oh, I failed, I can't do this, that's a cop-out. You just gave up. You just said, I'm not willing to pay the price. That's another thing that the P could stand for, price. Resistance training to get to a certain level requires you pay a price. If you pay the price, you get what you're after. If you don't pay the price, sorry, it's not happening. So persistence, the P step, is really about recognizing if I keep going until I get what I want, I always get what I want. That's a pretty cool place to be.
Thank you. Achieving the impossible often requires a shift in your mindset. How can entrepreneurs achieve that shift in mindset in order to embrace their 10x superpower?
So the first step is in the title. It's think 10x. Think in terms of impossible rather than possible. You don't know what's possible until you embrace the impossible, if that makes sense. It's counterintuitive. It's sort of the opposite of conventional wisdom. But most of us are aiming too low. And then we get what we're aiming for, or we fall short of it, but we're aiming too low. If you aim high, and I don't mean just, okay, I want 50% growth this year. I want 70% growth. I mean really high. I want 10x growth. I want to do something that's impossible. Then your brain starts accommodating that. You start looking at the world differently. A classic case in point. Everybody knows about the 80-20 rule, right? 20% of your activities produce 80% of your results. I've been hearing that for 50 years. Nobody ever tells me, how do I tell the difference between the 80% and the 20%? It's always after the fact. It's always, you look at the past year and you say, boy, if I'd done more of this instead of this. It doesn't tell you what to do in the coming year. With 10x thinking, if you think big enough, if you think impossible, then your focus narrows like this. And suddenly all that noise, all that 80% of activities that are essentially wasting your time, they go away. Because you realize, if I'm serious about this 10x goal, then I have to focus on this one or two things that are going to get me there instead of the 900 things that could get me to 20% or 30%. You do the incremental approach and you get lost in decision making. The psychologists talk about this as cognitive overload and cognitive overhead. You don't know how to make a decision because you don't have the data to make a decision. If you got 900 options, you don't know enough about all the options to decide which one to pursue. If you got one or two options, bang, now you know where to go. So my advice to entrepreneurs is think much, much, much bigger than where you are. One of my clients told me this, and I loved the saying. He said, pick a goal, put a zero next to it. I was like, wow, that's 10x right there. I love that. That's how you think 10x.
Thank you. How can entrepreneurs overcome self-limiting beliefs and self-doubt and become courageous? Let's say if they already do have tremendous goals.
So if they have a 10x goal, it's sort of self-correcting, if that makes sense. Doubt and fear become irrelevant. You don't have time for doubt or fear if you're committed to a 10x goal. If you're committed to doing something impossible, you're not trying to figure out how you can fail, which is really what fear or doubt is, or what you're not trying to figure out what could go wrong. You're trying to figure out how to make something go right. So it's this bigger focus, this focus on the impossible is partially self-correcting of that. The other thing to keep in mind is that this is going to sound really weird, people fear, but fear is a natural thing. Fear keeps us safe, right? There's a car coming, get the heck out of the way. That fear does that. But courage is not the absence of fear. It's taking action when you're afraid. And people don't seem to understand that you got to have fear to have courage, right? If you don't have fear, there can be no courage, because if you're not afraid to do something, it doesn't take any courage to do it. It's just, you just do it. So fear is not necessarily a bad thing. Telling yourself, I'm not going to take action, that's a bad thing. But telling yourself, I'm committed to this, I'm going to take action even though it scares the crap out of me, that's where you have to be. And if your goal is big enough, this is another piece of this, and I don't mean to deflect too much, but the way the mind works, people tend to think that we create our goals to serve our needs, right? I want to set a goal because this is what I want. But it's really the opposite. Our goals create us. If you want a bigger present, if you want your life to be bigger now, create a bigger future. The bigger future will empower the bigger present. It has to start with the future. It sounds crazy. Again, it's not conventional wisdom, but that's how the mind works.
Thank you. How can you overcome the fear of taking action? For example, let's say that you know that in order to reach, a 6-figure, 7-figure, 8-figure income, you need to speak to clients that are currently making 6, 7, 8-figure amounts right now. So how do you overcome that fear of taking the action you have to take in order to achieve your massive goal?
You don't overcome fear. You embrace fear. You acknowledge that you're afraid and you say, and you commit, I'm going to do this even though I'm afraid. That sounds so simple, it's easy to ignore, but take anything you're afraid of. If you're asking yourself, how do I do this? That's the wrong question, because you don't really have an answer for that. On the other hand, if you say, okay, how do I get started? That's a much easier question. Take your example, you're talking to somebody who's 9 figures, you want to ask them for help or advice or to collaborate on a project, you just get started. One of the things I like is you do a quick countdown. You're scared to death, you're just paralyzed. So you unparalyze by saying, okay, I'm going to do it on 1, 3, 2, 1, and then you just do it. It becomes like a game. So this becomes a little cadence that happens whenever you feel afraid. If you want to ask somebody out, right? You're terrified of being rejected. 3, 2, 1. Hey, you want to have dinner tomorrow night? That's a way to simply act in light of your fear. You're not trying to overcome it. You're not trying to get rid of it. It's there. What you're trying to do, and this is where I think people need to change their focus. You're not worried about the fear. You're worried about the action. So the question is, you should be asking yourself, how do I take action? Not how do I overcome fear? How do I take action? How do I get started? What's the first thing I could do? Right? And if you're asking somebody out, you ask them out. If you're asking somebody for advice, you ask them for advice. If you need to apply to some school to get a certification, you do that. Whatever the first step is, you just do that. And you assume, yeah, I'm going to be afraid, but I'm going to do it anyway because I'm committed to it. Commitment really helps. Commitment makes it all happen.
Thank you. How do you make the impossible easy?
So think of this. This is one of these things, again, we're not taught this when we're growing up, but we live it. This has happened to all of us over and over and over again. We take something that's impossible and we make it easy. We just don't know we've done it. It's a deeply embedded instinct in all of us. So let me give you an example. When you were 9 months old or whatever, crawling around, and you wanted to walk, it was physically beyond you to walk. It was impossible. It was emotionally beyond you. It was psychologically beyond you. But you kept trying to walk. And you kept trying until you walked, right? I mean, there's the old saying in the self-help business, how many times will an infant try to walk before it gives up? It doesn't give up. It doesn't know how to give up. It just keeps going until it starts walking. So what an infant does without understanding it is it does something that is impossible and makes it possible. And then before you know it, it's easy. It's not just walking, it's running around, right? You say, okay, that's a special case. That's an infant learning to walk. That doesn't count. Okay, how about when you learn to talk? How about when you learn to read? How about when you learn to write? Well, I was too young. None of that matters. Okay, how about when you learn to ride a bike? I had 3 older brothers. They were riding around the neighborhood on their bikes. I'm on training wheels, falling over, injuring myself, thinking this is impossible. I can't do this. But I wanted to ride a bike. So pretty soon I made the impossible possible. And then I made the impossible easy. In fact, now I couldn't forget how to ride a bike if I wanted to. Same is true when you learn how to drive a car. It seems impossible when you're in the back seat watching your parents drive. And then you start driving, it changes your life. And that's what all these things have in common. You make this leap from the impossible to the possible and then the easy, and your life is never the same afterwards. And when I teach this, people have all kinds of interesting reactions. They try to mismatch. They try to say, nah, that can't apply to me. Nah, that doesn't really. Oh, that I was too young. Okay, how about this? Was there ever a time in your life when you were making 10 times less money than you are now? And everybody goes, sure. I was, mowing the lawn or delivering papers or baking cookies or whatever I was doing. Okay, you grew your income 10 times, maybe way more than 10 times, maybe 100 times. You went from what you probably thought was impossible then to where you are now. You did that. You have already done this in your life over and over and over again. And there are other examples each of us has that are personal to us. But it's a great exercise to start asking yourself, what did I do that I once thought was impossible and then I made possible and then it became easy? So we have all this in it. What I do is simply bring it out of people. I help people get out of their own way and think bigger than they ever realized they could. Think about the impossible instead of just the practical.
Thank you. How do entrepreneurs overcome trauma they have experienced through taking certain actions in the past and overcoming that in order to be brave again and take those same actions again, possibly differently, so they can get better results.
So this is one of those ones where if I were dealing with a client who had this as an issue, I would ask a bunch of questions. The first thing to do is sort of get an understanding. The trauma is like a third person in the room if you're having a conversation with somebody. So it would help me, if I were going to help the client, it would help me, and I'm not a licensed therapist or counselor or psychologist or anything. I'm just talking about, let's say I'm talking to an entrepreneur, which is the example you used. It would help me to understand that third person in the room. So I would ask some questions about that. But let's say we've got that framed up and we have an idea about that. Again, it gets back to this whole idea of trauma. It's there. What is your 10X ambition? What is the goal you want so much that you're willing to commit to it that is 10 times more than what you have now, or that is impossible? If somebody says, well, I want to improve my marriage, which is, a valid goal. You say, okay, do you think that's possible? And everybody will go, well, yeah, I think so. And my response would be, then it's not ambitious enough. What's a goal beyond that? What's a relationship goal that you think is impossible? And maybe it's recommitting to the marriage in some new way. Maybe it's going on some dream honeymoon, second or third or fifth honeymoon or something like this. It's something that's just so far beyond what you think is possible. And then you commit to it, and then you start making it happen. This is true in health. It's true in relationships. It's true in investing. It's true in business. Yeah, you focus on the audacity of your goal. You commit to that. And these other things, fear and trauma are very closely related psychologically. The audacity of your goal and the commitment to your goal drags these things along. You may remember this third person in the room called trauma. This person is there. It's real. It's part of your life. So you drag it along to your goal. And pretty soon that person is getting farther and farther and farther behind because it's just less relevant. You're not afraid, or that's not right. You're still afraid, but you're taking action. So if you're taking action, the fear doesn't mean anything. It doesn't mean the same thing. Let's put it that way, okay? If you do something, even though you're afraid of doing it, then the fear is like, oh, okay, well, so I'm afraid, but I'm still doing it. So it's the action focus is the key.
Thank you. How do entrepreneurs become 10 times more courageous?
Well, so if you were entrepreneurs, and I tend to work with successful entrepreneurs, and they often share a character trait. They're hard on themselves. They beat themselves up when they make a mistake or when they fail, and they think that's the secret of their success. It could be very hard, So if an entrepreneur is hard on himself or hard on herself, I always think, imagine you're in front of a child, and you want to teach a child a new skill, and the child tries a skill and fails. Do you just start beating the child up? Of course not. The child would go, what are you doing? Leave me alone. I want out of here. That's not the way to teach a child. We know this intuitively. What would you do? You would encourage the child. What does that mean? You would find something that it's doing right and congratulate it for that and give it some encouragement. Well, what word is in the middle of encourage? Courage. Courage is all about encouraging yourself the same way you would encourage a child. And if it's something you're afraid of, remember, you can't have courage without fear. So the fear is a given. If you need courage, it's because you're afraid. And how do you get courage? You give yourself courage. You find ways to do it. And one of the key ways to do this is one of the breakthroughs I teach in my book. How do you measure progress? Most of the successful entrepreneurs I know have some ideal example of where they want to get. And they beat themselves up because they're not there yet, right? It's like you're on a ship heading toward the horizon, and you're pissed off because you never reached the horizon. Well, you can't reach the horizon. It's the horizon. It's always going to be out there. It's an ideal. You're heading toward it, but you never reach it. Same is true with how you measure progress. If you're an entrepreneur and you're thinking, well, here's where I think I should be, and I'm not there, and I feel like crap because I'm not there, you're always unhappy. By definition, you're unhappy. So what you do is you turn that on its head. Again, this is the opposite of conventional wisdom, which is pretty much what the book teaches. You measure your progress not from where you are to where you want to be. You measure your progress from where you are to where you started. Now you say, what has changed? What have I done differently? How have I grown? What have I learned? Same with dealing with any kind of fear. One of the ways you encourage yourself is you say, I'm scared to take this next step, but in the last 6 weeks, I've done blah, 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 blah. I've done all these things. Most of them I didn't think I could do, and I did them, and I feel great about it. That's how to get your head right about the next step. Look at the previous 5, 10, 50 steps that you've taken. Measure your progress from where you started to where you are, and then you're using your excitement, your passion to fuel your progress. That's the key.
Wow, that's a really good way of looking at it. I love that. How can entrepreneurs include leverage in their life in order to reach this 10x superpower?
Can I ask you a quick follow-up? What do you mean by leverage exactly?
In terms of leveraging what they already have, using the different resources that they have.
Okay, all right. So here's another thing I teach in the book. Again, the book is 10 breakthroughs. So each one is breakthrough that can change your life in and of itself. You put them all together and you have this amazing superpower. So I call this the power of who. If you commit to something you can't achieve, you can't do it, how do you achieve it? That's the wrong question to ask. Instead of asking how, you start asking who. The key to making the impossible possible is to add to your capabilities. Because when you say something is impossible, what you really mean is it's impossible for me. I can't do it. I'm not up to it. I don't have the talent, skill, fill in the blank. I don't have that. Okay, you're right. You can't do it. It's impossible. So what if you started adding capabilities? What if you started filling in those blanks? And then as you do this, it's like this magical process. It's really cool. You start thinking differently about what was impossible. You get to a point where you say, I think I can do that. And then you get to a point where you do it, and then you get to a point where you say, this wasn't so hard. This was easy, because you've added all these capabilities. Guess how you add capabilities? The easiest way to add capabilities: other people. So if I identified an impossible goal, I've realized I need all these things to make it happen, and I don't have any of them. Who does? I guarantee you there's somebody on this planet who can help you, who can bring their capability and add it to your capability. And now the two of you are more than the sum of the parts. You create something new under the sun by combining your capabilities. And that's just one other person. You could add 10 other people, or 100 other people, or 1,000 other people. When I teach this, I tell people there's no limit to this. That's on the front of my book, and the 10x that's in the title is not 10 with an x next to it. It's 10 with a little x as an exponent. It's exponential growth. It's growth that builds on itself by orders of magnitude. And if you get that, you realize, well, there has to be an end to this. I can't just keep growing and growing and growing exponentially. And the answer is, of course you are. There are 8 billion people in the world. You got a lot to choose from. And you can reach most of them through technology today. And the gig economy and all the various new arrangements for business that are forming. If you figure out what you want, you actually touched on a brilliant example earlier. You said somebody's earning 9 figures. I'd like to earn 9 figures. I want to approach them and say, can you give me some advice? That's a great way to start. That's somebody who can bring their capability into your life, and now it becomes your capability. And you can do that by asking them questions. You can do that by creating a collaboration, a business collaboration where they get what they need and want, you get what you need and want, and now you have this thing moving forward that's bigger than the two of you together. And that doesn't have to be 2, it could be 5 or 5,000 or whatever. So there's no limit, because there's no limit to the collaboration you can do. That's really the answer to your question. Leveraging resources is really about leveraging people, helping them get what they want so that you can get what you want.
Thank you. How can entrepreneurs find more areas where they can get leverage?
Well, first you figure out, where do you need leverage? Okay, so let's let you commit to a simple example. You want to grow your revenue. You are committed to growing your revenue by a factor of 10 within, say, 3 years. You're going to increase your business by 1,000% in 3 years, okay? First question you ask is not, how do I do that? Wrong question. Who can help me do that? Now your brain is thinking differently. This is all about how you think, this whole 10x superpower. So you start thinking, well, who can help me do that? And you think, well, wait a minute. Maybe you look for somebody who has done what you're trying to do, and that person can give you advice. Or maybe you just say, well, I want to create this absolutely killer website that makes what I have to offer totally compelling, irresistible. But I don't know how to do a website. Bingo. So you find somebody, I call it find a who, to do your website. And somebody who's excited about doing your website, not just delegation. People sometimes think this is delegation, and delegation is really done in a very poor way in most of businesses that I've encountered, because the person at the top says, I don't want to do this stuff anymore. I'll give it to this person. And this person says, oh, here's some more crap rolling downhill that I got to do. That nobody's happy with that. The trick to finding a who, the right who, is finding somebody who wants to do what you want them to do. They're as excited about that as you are about doing whatever your main thing is. I call your main thing your joy strength. It's something that you're so good at, you love doing it, and you love doing it so much, you're good at it. And we all have characteristics like this. Most entrepreneurs don't spend much time at all doing this. They get trapped by their own business. They're doing all this, accounting, about all this stuff that they really don't want to do. It's not why they founded the business, but they have to get it done. What they need to do is find a who to do something that they don't want to do, but the who does want to do. If you do that, then you can leverage yourself infinitely. There's no limit to doing that. And again, it comes back to figuring out, what do I need a who to do for me? That's how you figure out how to leverage yourself.
Follow us for more interviews with world's most influential business titans, providing you with the insights to awaken to your full potential, so you can get paid to be yourself, find true happiness, and manifest anything you desire.